Greetings, everyone. This is Families of Virtue, and I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
And I'm Nick Wiegand. And today we're talking about the grateful family and its contribution to the enriched life. So I want to begin with Colossians 3:17, and it reads, "And whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." Now, I know here we have this holiday, Thanksgiving, upcoming, where everybody usually talks about thanks and what they're grateful for and the gratitude that is involved. And it shouldn't revolve around a single holiday, but I guess it's a good time to kind of bring it up and what its role in the family should be. So I'm going to begin by kind of just give me a rundown of what gratitude actually is.
So we teach gratitude. It as an action. It is giving to someone the proper thanks, the proper recognition that is due to them. As a virtue, it's the quality when you're that kind of person. If somebody does something for you or you receive something, you're that kind of person that naturally feels that kind of that you need to recognize the need to in some ways repay, show them in turn. You're just kind of that kind of person. The opposite of that, if you're entitled, then when somebody does something for you, you don't have you. Well, obviously you should have done that. And it's the kind of person who receives and just expects it. So it's more than just. I think the mistake that we make in America having a holiday around this, like, okay, so this holiday we're just going to try to say thank you more, and we go for the action, or we sit around and we try to be thankful for all we have, and the very next day we spend all our money getting all the things that we want on the special deals, and because we we have this phrase, and I've heard people talk about it's an attitude of gratitude, and it rhymes, but what they're hitting at with that is that virtue is an attitude, it's a disposition, it's a quality in your soul. But when you have that kind of characteristic, when you're a person of gratitude, it will come out naturally. But I think what also happens, it's good for your soul because when you are truly thankful for what you have, you're not sitting around depressed or longing and coveting all the things that you don't have because you're just too thankful for what you already do have.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think this is where we talked about it a couple episodes ago about the flip side of contentment is gratitude. It's a recognition of what we have, what God has done for us. Because everything that we experience in this life, all the different material blessings that we have is ultimately from Him. And we, with that recognition, we give thanks to Him, and then with that attitude, we kind of interact with each other in that sort of way. And it's kind of, we understand that when we're talking to people and we're doing nice things, it's part of like the community. It's a part of ability to socialize with another person, is ability to be able to give and receive properly. Because those are the type of things that are difficult for us in our culture. Like the children today, they have a sense of entitlement in some sense, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But they just receive without giving the proper due. And I think that's really kind of a breakdown of communication between people.
Okay, so I mean, you brought up the sense of entitlement that you said you wanted to talk about, and that is the excess
Yeah.
of, or I mean, the defect of gratitude, the too little, and you said, of course you'll do that for me, and that it extends even further. I think there's levels of entitlement of, yeah, of course you'll do that for me, but you should have done more. So I mean, it even like goes too much. What is the opposite? Because I've met people who are overly grateful, I guess, overly grateful. So what would you consider the excess of gratitude to be?
Well, and there's different words because it can manifest differently. So when you tend to try to be gracious because you're trying to get something, that might fall into what we call flattery. So you're like, "Oh, you look so nice today," like you're just really pouring it on because you want something. And it's disingenuous, and sometimes people can recognize that.
Well, so I just want to make sure. So the idea of, and I think a lot of people use the word flattery wrong. And I think it's important to note that flattery is not a good thing. It's never a good thing. It is always disingenuous, and that's what you're talking about.
Right, right. Your purpose is wrong. Like they might actually look good in what they're wearing, or if they said something well, or they whatever it is that you're flattering them about. It goes back to your intentions. If you're doing this because they did something really well, and it's like, hey, I just really want to let them know I appreciate them, and I think that's your gratitude. Now you can do the same thing. You can let them know how great a job they did, but when you do it because you want them to do something for you, now you've corrupted this good thing called gratitude, and now you're using it for your own gain. And I think in some ways, flattery falls into that. If somebody does something nice for you, and you just almost feel like you owe them, and you have to repay that, and now you're in their debt. A difficult word. You're more like servile. You go into servility. You become more like their servant. They've done something almost like in the older movies, particularly like if you're looking like the medieval and fantasy movies, like that someone saved somebody's life, and oh, I owe you a blood debt, and now I'm in your service, and now you basically owe me because you saved my life. And most people are like, I think you're going a little overboard.
Yeah.
That's the excess. It's like it doesn't match. Like it's like if I'm very thankful if somebody saves me $5, but I'm not going to fawn over that. It's excessive. It can almost be cringeworthy. And somebody is just so overly displaying what we would think of as gratitude. And I think that's why it's important in our culture is, again, we have a holiday called Thanksgiving, and we're thankful for what we have. But then we do two things. We use this holiday to really experience gluttony. Hey, that's what we're gonna do.
But I eat a lot of pie.
Yeah, we're gonna have the buffets at home, and so we're thankful, we're rejoicing. We have this bounty. That's nice. And then, as typical in America, we go out and we then use. It's almost like we've used this holiday. That's what people are waiting on. We're gonna show this Thanksgiving. We're off work. Almost everybody's off work on that Friday. Many people are off work on that Friday, and so the retailers know that. And then all of a sudden, people, after being so thankful, they go and they're going to try to use that and now gain stuff with these Black Friday sales. I think it just turns the whole thing on its head. I think there's this aspect where by doing this year after year, this is how you cultivate either virtues or vices, repeated actions. It trains you. And I think in our culture, we've trained ourselves to actually cultivate the vices associated with gratitude.
Yeah.
Even though it's the holiday is Thanksgiving, just like when somebody says, oh, I'm just expressing my gratitude. Well, you're not just expressing gratitude if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you're doing it in the wrong way, you're doing it by the wrong means. And I think in some ways that's what our holiday has become. It is a good idea. We should be, because we're forgetful people. We're sinful people. And it's easy to lose sight of how much we have. But I think what surrounds that has become more of the vice than the virtue.
I think we're talking about the same thing, but I think we need to break it out into two different aspects or two different parts. So I hear you guys saying gratitude and, the inward nature of that, the heart aspect of that. But then we are completely mixing that with the outward expression of what that gratitude then looks like. Because I think they are separate. I think that cultivation of heart, that the inward of actually being grateful for what we have, then the expression external, which is where we talk about the flattery, and then in counseling, this is something I use on a regular in my discipleship groups that I use also, is the idea of affirmations of affirming others and showing that actual gratitude externally.
Mm.
So when we talk about this and its impact on our family, not just on our culture and ourselves, this impact on our family. How then does the expression of this gratitude impact our family and those around us?
Well, I think in terms of my marriage, I'll start with that. Um, kind of as a man, because I can't speak for women, but you recognize that this idea of gratitude is really important for a marriage to function properly. You have to. It's not that you want to flatter your wife with just like kind of empty phrases, but you want to have intention. Because I know my wife, I know her very well, and I know what kind of things that she wants to hear, things that she values when I express it to her. And I think there's two things that could happen. Well, if you do it without intention, you're just doing it out of habit is one kind of way of just kind of overlooking what you're supposed to do or withholding it. I think a lot of times we do that. And I think kind of I don't know if it's maliciously or unconsciously, but sometimes the times where we need to really express to or even out of pride. I think that even exists within a married couple, like who's actually the smarter one, who's the better one, or whatever. And you kind of withhold this gratitude towards things that they're doing for you and for the family.
Yeah, I don't want him to get a big head, or I don't want him to start getting too cocky, or all these things that.
Because I think by the intention, like I always like from my perspective, I always like to find something and kind of surprise my wife with, like I really noticed what you did here. And I really appreciate like what you're doing for me and for the family and other like actually be like showing that I'm thinking about it, that it's intentional, and that I'm not just like flattering her with just some words just to get what I want.
So that's the importance and the how to, but like, what is the impact? Because I let it off with, its impact on an enriched life. What is the impact on the family?
Well, and I think there's a closeness, there's a bond that develops when you express from the heart, and that's that interconnection. When you're that kind of person, you're going to naturally express it. You're going to be the kind of person who wants the other person to know that they're valued, to know the appreciation, just because it makes them feel good. We all feel good when we're appreciated, when we know that. And so it strengthens bonds. And in that same vein, and I just thought about there was an article I had seen many moons ago, and it was about a mom who said that she would never force her child to say thank you. So this is something that in terms of raising the kids and what should we do? Should we force our children to say thank you? Because sometimes, particularly my boys will do something.
Yes,
And I was like,
we should.
yeah. To be clear, yeah, that there is that. But her take on it, and I understand where this is coming from. She's like, well, if it's not genuine, why would I force it? Why would I encourage my child to say thank you when they don't actually feel thanks in the situation? So the answer to that is we don't use the word force. We teach our children to say that thank you, to be aware of when somebody does something for you, you owe them at least an expression of gratitude, and that helps them think about these things correctly. That our children, I want them to recognize when somebody has done something for them, and I want them to express that recognition. I want them to be the kind of person who naturally feels good about expressing that gratitude and that thankfulness because it's genuine.
Yep.
And I think that's when you have a family like that, it's so much more enjoyable because there's a genuine expression that just travels among the family members,
Yep.
that particularly among spouses, that when, again, my wife wants me to recognize what she's done, that I used to have the habit, I like to think I've broken it, but I used to have the habit where I would recognize it, and in my mind, I see that, and I'm thinking, "Oh, this was good," but I didn't express that. I it didn't come out and say that, and she's like, "It'd be super nice if you would just actually say that," and I'm like, "You know what? It really would be, like, what has happened?" And, so breaking that habit and just I gotta told her, I was like, "I'm not unappreciative. I just don't have the habit of expressing it." But from a sense of justice, because gratitude is in the category of justice. It's how we relate to other people. I owe that to her. Like we all need to hear that. She needs to hear that. So it's not from a weakness on her part. This is how human relationships are supposed to work. And in the family, our kids need to hear that. Our spouses, our neighbors, our parents, like even for adults, like even now, like with my mom, expressing my gratitude to her
Yeah.
that I'm so much more conscious of it now. And there is a sense I do enjoy it. I enjoy expressing that to her. She enjoys hearing it, and it creates a bond between us
I think that's
here now, even in our adult and senior adult years.
So I want to challenge kind of something you said. You said she would do those things, and I would be appreciative. I just wouldn't express it. I want to challenge. Like, do you really genuinely believe you had gratitude towards that if you were unwilling to express it?
See, I don't think it was unwilling. I think it's just my own social deficiencies sometimes that you know,
Never,
yeah, me.
never.
But I recognize again that that was one of those things. It was never from a sense of withholding.
Mm.
It was just social lazing. I don't know what to call it. It's the kind of thing where it would go through my head, but it wouldn't come out my mouth. And when she brought it up to me, it was one of those, I wasn't resistant. I was like, oh, yeah, I really should and again, that's when I apologize. So, I did. I was very sincere. I'm like, I'm really sorry. You did deserve this and I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And what you do is you don't get defensive. You just adjust it.
Yeah.
And that's where I just became cognizant of it. And now it's much more.
I think that, I mean, that's the big difference between the N-word and the outward
Right.
expression.
And I think it's like the idea of becoming the kind of family that shows gratitude, like becoming that, like we're going to do that, being intentional about that, especially as the husband leading the family. Just taking, because I think so my kids, so I have a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And there's a little bit of an age gap between my 7-year-old and my 13-year-old. And so there's headbutting and they're very similar, but they're very, like, they can get really nasty with one another. And for me, like I want to instill this in my children, but if I don't display what it looks like, how do they know?
Right.
Like for me, like I think that not only do we express gratitude towards, say, our spouse, but we also do it in front of our children, showing them that this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I think that the idea we talked earlier in a previous episode about just the idea of passing on from one generation these qualities to the next generation, because you want our children, once they are out of our presence, or they're at school, or they're gonna actually do these types of things when we're not there watching over them.
Yeah. So that's interesting. And I'm going to kind of wrap this all together with one question. And were you forced to say thank you as a child?
So my upbringing, and I've never hit it. My upbringing was always one that was very loose. I've always joked. I've said we had two rules growing up: don't make a life, don't take a life. Anything in between was fair game. So I was not trained in these ways, and that's probably why with my wife I was that way.
It's like you read my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you read my mind. Yeah. So the idea that you want your children to be authentic. So I get the point of that article, but you must be authentic in front of them and set that example. But you also have to hold them accountable to these things, and maybe not even just your children, but your entire family, because your wife held you accountable for the outward expression of that gratitude. And I think that if through open communication, if your wife would have said you appreciate this and you said no, then she could have educated you, hopefully in a nice way, but as to why you should appreciate it, which is what we should do for our children. If they don't, like this idea that I would want my kids to be inauthentic, and I don't want to force them to say thank you. What you're doing is you're showing them why they should be thankful if they're not. And if they're not thankful, you're making them say it so that they see the things in which they should be thankful for.
Yeah, they're making the outward expression. And I think that, we talked about being thankful to, say, our wives, but also to our children. Because a lot of times we're just like, the kids have their chores and their responsibilities, and like that's just what they're supposed to do. And we just kind of like, they do all their things and we just go about our day. Another thing that I've been trying to be more intentional about is really just taking the time and individually, not just like, oh, you kids are doing great tonight, but like my son Lucas, I'm like, I'm like really proud of you. But you did really a great job here.
Mhm.
Like right now, they're watching my daughter. Like I'm here, And so their responsibilities for her. I'm going to go home and make sure that they know that I appreciate what they did, because now I'm able to come here and have these conversations with you guys, and like, and I, because that will encourage them that, what they're doing is actually not just, dads make me watch our sister again, but it's actually like they know that what they're doing is actually making a positive impact on the family as a whole, but by me showing my gratitude towards them.
And it's important. This is not everybody gets a trophy,
Yeah.
right? This is an authentic outward expression of someone who has cultivated this virtue of gratitude in their life. So my question is, if people out there are struggling with feeling appreciative, without struggling with gratitude in their life, if they can look in the mirror right now and say, I am one entitled human being, because we are selfish creatures in general. If that is the case, what would be the first step to cultivating the gratitude in themselves first?
think that's where we do have to start there, because I think, especially in families and relationships, if you have somebody and they're not expressing gratitude, I hear a lot of people, well, they're not saying thank you to me, so I'm not going to say thank you to them.
Right.
And you just perpetuate the problem. So when you become the kind of person who is gracious and shows that gratitude and genuinely feels it, rather than, oh, thanks a lot for that, when you do that, people around you will see that change. They'll recognize that. They will come to appreciate that from you, because that's the point of it. But then it becomes reciprocal. So that's why, like, going back to the very first question, how's that? It changes everything about that dynamic. But you've got to genuinely, I think this is why, taking a time like Thanksgiving and to really sit and to appreciate what it is that you have, to think through that. It's a process of reflection.
Mm.
We teach us a lot with a lot of the virtues to sit and reflect on that, to think on that, and to, in that sense, just the same way you would adjust your attitude by the way you think or view anything, that's what you're doing with gratitude, to have that proper attitude about it. So that way, when um, I joked with my kids that one day I'm gonna write a kid's book that even grown ups spill, because they would like spill their milks and other things, and and I said it's not that we just want to be um, flattery or just gratuitous in our gratitude, and like, oh, I'm just so glad I had milk to spill, like that's that's the overboard. But to have the sense of, no, this is okay because we still have milk. We're all right. It changes how you view everyone and everything.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important. It's not just so that they will feel appreciated. That is a part of it. But when everybody has that sense, again, it changes your whole outlook. It's going to change the dynamic in your relationships with your spouse, with your kids, with your neighbors, with your boss, with your coworkers. It changes everything, and most people don't realize the effect that being a person of truly who has a truly gracious heart and a heart filled with gratitude and thanksgiving, the difference that makes.
Yeah. So I just want to make a suggestion, because this is something that I go through with a lot of people. This is something that I really attempt to teach others, is this idea of gratitude. So my suggestion, if anybody is struggling with this, to honestly start with your prayer life.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too.
Yeah, when you reflect on scripture and the way that, all of the examples we have of prayer begin with these thanks, these praising God for the blessings that he has bestowed on us. It's not about just saying thank you God for this amazing life, because I know a lot of people who will talk like everything's good. Like, what's good? Well, and it's very specific and very making sure that we aren't mincing words, that we are actually focusing on genuine blessings in our life. And it really begins, at least a little bit, to cultivate that spirit of having gratitude. So, gentlemen, again, thank you. I truly enjoy meeting here and having these conversations. And for those listening, you can find us at familiesofvirtue.com. I want to thank you, and I want to urge you to affirm others and thank God for the blessings in your life. Cultivate that virtue of gratitude. Thanks.